Hey, welcome to the studio. Come on in, let's talk about recipe development. So today I'd like to introduce a new series that we're going to do here, and that is sort of a behind the scenes look at how we develop the recipes. We're going to do the recipe video, so if all you want is the recipe and you don't want to hear us talking about the changes that we made along the way, the recipe video will exist as its own piece, and that's all you have to watch. But if you like the recipe video and you want to know the steps that we went through to get there, what happened behind the scenes, we're going to have 4 or 5 videos that'll deal with that. And we've got 3 streams in particular that are going to be coming up. One of them is how to make canelés. Another one is on Yorkshire pudding, which is a simple recipe that never works. And another one on the best, and you know, best is always subjective, but the best way to cook a prime rib roast. In order to kick that off, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we sort of distill down to a recipe, what research we do at the very beginning to get to the point where we, make our first cut before we, stir in the first ingredients, what got us there. Sometimes the spark of an idea for a recipe comes from a restaurant that we've eaten in, someplace that we've traveled to. There's a lot of stuff that we've seen on the road through China and India and Nepal that just fantastic. Japan, incredible foods in Japan that we've eaten. We come home and we start to sort of decipher what it was we ate and how can you make it in North America. And that's the thing, even though so much is available to us here in North America, there's some ingredients that you just can't get. And so you have to start substituting and figuring out, which then leads to the problem of, those people who are incredibly dogmatic about recipes, that it has to be authentic. And I think that it has to be authentic, but not authentic to the original, because who knows what the original really is. Sometimes you can find the original, but a lot of times you can't. I think it just has to be the best version that you can make with what you have on hand. And not staying original sometimes leads to some happy accidents. Often a lot of the recipes that we do are things that we ate as children, that our parents and grandparents made. So in those cases, we'll go to the family cookbooks and, there's recipes written on pieces of paper that, my grand put in there or Julie's grand put in there. And so we'll just sort of update those to reflect what ingredients are available today, and also changing the amounts just a little bit, also to reflect how people measure things today. So we'll start out with our own cookbooks. We'll start out with the family cookbooks. We'll start out with cookbooks that we have around the house that deal with science and food and science and cooking to figure out what makes something work. The science behind cooking is as important, I think. And you start to notice with all recipe research that, especially for baking, that most recipes don't stray too far from a core. You can usually find what the core recipe is, and then there will be outliers, people that have made slight changes to it. But the bulk of the recipes will always be of this one core recipe for baking. For cooking, savory dishes, it can be all over the map. So in the case of canelé, we found a dozen or so recipes written in English, where pretty much all of the ingredients matched. Then you take it one step further. This is a French recipe, so you start searching in French. Je suis Canadien, I speak a little bit of French, I can figure things out pretty easily. The next step after that is a trip to the reference library, where again, you start to look at cookbooks from pre-1900. And those cookbooks are invaluable in figuring out what the trajectory of a recipe has been. And if you can't find recipes in print form, which is usually what I prefer, are old books, Google has digitized some fantastic cookbooks all the way back to the 1600s, and you can find just about anything and everything in those cookbooks. So that's the first step. That's the research step. That gets the ball rolling before we start mixing. And that research step often reveals some very strange things. You start to realize that everything's been done before, that a lot of people who are claiming to have invented stuff, and I'm thinking of a couple of very particular things at this point, they didn't invent it. It was done long before they were ever born. Everything's been done, everything's been tried. There's very little that's new. It's just a new take of something that's very old. So that's step one, research. We look at, for every recipe we do, we look at least 25 or 30 versions of it and sort of distill it down to something that we think we'd like, and then we start the testing phase. So the next videos for cannelé, for Yorkshire pudding, for roasting, they will all be the videos where we start the process of testing. Come along for the ride, and maybe you'll find something that you like.